When my wife passed away, I thought the worst was behind me. But then her boss called with a message that sent chills down my spine. "Mr. Thatcher, come here now. I have something to show you. Don't tell your kids. You'll be in danger." I had no idea what he meant, but something in his voice told me this wasn't a conversation I could ignore. When I walked into his office that morning, I froze upon seeing who was waiting at the door. "I'm glad you're here. Follow my story to the end, and let me know what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this shocking truth has traveled." I never thought that after 45 years of marriage, I would feel like a stranger at my own wife's funeral. But there I was, seated in the front pew at Phoenix Memorial Chapel, while my daughter Sky and soon-in-law Axel handled every decision as if I didn't exist. "Dad, just let us handle everything. You're too emotional to think clearly," Sky told me that morning, her voice carrying a patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. Axel nodded beside her with fake concern. I stayed quiet because I didn't have the strength to fight. Bryn had died of a heart attack 3 days earlier, so suddenly, I still couldn't process it. One moment she was drinking coffee, talking about spring flowers for our garden. The next I found her collapsed in our kitchen. "Massive cardiac failure," the paramedic said. At 72, I should have been prepared, but you're never ready to lose your life, partner. Everyone approached Sky and Axel for condolences, as if they were the primary mourners. I was just the fragile widower who needed protection from trauma. "Grandpa is taking this very hard," I heard Sky whisper. "We're handling everything. We don't want to burden him." Burden him. That word stung more than any condolence. Bryn never saw me as a burden, but since Sky married Axel 5 years ago, they spoke about me like I was becoming incompetent. During the service, something troubled me. Sky seemed more composed than grieving, responding to consolers with control. Axel kept checking his phone, glancing at his watch, like he had somewhere more important to be. After burial, people gathered at our Scottsdale home for reception. The house where Bryn and I lived 40 years suddenly felt foreign. Sky and Axel moved like hosts, directing caterers, accepting cards, discussing matters in hushed tones, while I sat invisible in my own home. "Dad, we've been talking," Sky said, settling across from me with that serious expression. "You shouldn't stay in this house alone. It's too big and dangerous now." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? There are wonderful senior living communities nearby," Axel added with his sales pitch voice. "Places with people your age, activities, medical care on site. I'm not moving to any nursing home." Sky patted my hand with calculated gentleness. "It's not a nursing home, Dad. These are luxury retirement communities. We could visit every weekend. This is my home," I saidly. My cell phone rang. Axel reached for it, but I grabbed it first. The caller ID showed Morrison and Associates Financial. "Mr. Thatcher, Vale Harrison, Bryn's boss. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to speak urgently. There's something important you need to know." Sky and Axel watched me intently, their expressions making me uncomfortable. "What kind of thing?" "I can't discuss it over the phone. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock? And Mr. Thatcher, this is crucial. Don't mention this conversation to anyone, especially your family members. What I need to show you could put you in serious danger." The line went dead. Stared at the phone with trembling hands. Why would Vale warn me against telling my own family? What could Bryn's boss know that would endanger me? And why did the two people who claimed to love me most suddenly feel like predators sizing up their prey? The next morning, I drove through downtown Phoenix with questions burning in my mind. Morrison and Associates Financial occupied a gleaming, 5-story tower. The elevator carried me to the 20th floor, where Vale Harrison's corner office commanded a panoramic view of the city below. Vale was 58, a silver-haired man who'd worked alongside Bryn for 15 years. Today, deep worry lines etched his face as he locked the door behind me. "Thatcher, what I'm about to show you will change everything," he said, moving to a secure filing cabinet. He withdrew a thick folder marked confidential in Bryn's familiar handwriting. 8 months ago, your wife came to me with disturbing suspicions. She was scared of her own daughter. My hands shook as I opened the folder. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, photographs, and documents I'd never seen. The first page bore a date from last spring. "They're planning something. I need to document everything. Bryn believes Sky and Axel were systematically preparing to control your life," Vale whispered. "Financial manipulation on a massive scale." I stared at power of attorney documents with forged signatures, medical evaluations claiming I had cognitive decline signed by a doctor I'd never met. Forms giving Sky complete control over my finances and medical decisions. I never signed these. Bryn knew that. She also knew they planned to use them anyway. Vale showed me Bryn's meticulous documentation. Missing medications that reappeared. In different locations. Car keys vanishing for hours. She'd recorded everything I'd dismissed as normal forgetfulness. Your wife realized they were creating evidence of memory problems, Vale explained. Bryn's notes revealed conversations with neighbors. Sky had been telling people my memory was failing, that I was becoming confused and forgetful. She'd planted seeds of doubt about my independence throughout our community. Meanwhile, Axel asked pointed questions about insurance policies and property values. He'd inquired about retirement accounts, investments, even our home's market value, all disguised as helping us plan for the future. They stopped talking whenever I appeared. I said, pieces clicking together. Your wife noticed. She hired a private investigator 6 months ago. The surveillance reports were chilling. Sky and Axel had researched guardianship laws, visited assisted living facilities, consulted lawyers about eldercare. They'd been preparing to remove me from my own life. Why didn't she tell me? She wanted certainty before accusing her daughter of such terrible things, and she feared they'd accelerate their plans if they suspected she knew. Vale closed the folder and looked directly at me. Thatcher, there's someone who can explain this better than I can. Someone who's been watching, waiting for the right moment. My heart raced as Vale walked toward a conference room door. Are ya ready for the truth? Because once you hear it, there's no going back. He knocked softly. He's here, he called out. A muffled voice responded from inside, and my heart stopped. That voice, soft and familiar, belonged to someone who was supposed to be lying in a grave at Desert Lawn Cemetery. Someone I'd watched them lower into the ground just yesterday. The conference room door opened with agonizing slowness, and my world tilted off its axis. Bryn stepped out alive and healthy, her familiar blue eyes filled with love and apology. She looked exactly as she had 5 days ago, except for the weight of secrets she'd been carrying. Hello, my love. I'm so sorry, she whispered. My legs gave out. I collapsed into Vale's leather chair, gasping for air as the room spun around me. This couldn't be real. This had to be some cruel hallucination brought on by grief and stress. This isn't possible, I stammered, my voice barely audible. I buried you. I held your hand when you died. I watched them lower your casket into the ground. Bryn rushed to my side, her familiar touch, grounding me in reality. These were her hands, warm and real, not the cold fingers I'd kissed goodbye at the funeral home. I know this is shocking, but I had to protect us, she said, kneeling beside my chair. There was no other way. I was torn between overwhelming joy and crushing anger. You let me grieve. You let me plan your funeral. You let me stand at your graveside and say goodbye forever. Tears streamed down her face. I wanted to tell you, but they were watching everything we did, every phone call, every conversation. If they'd suspected I was alive, they would have killed us both immediately. Val quietly placed a glass of water on his desk and stepped back, giving us space for this impossible reunion. She's been hiding here in the building for 5 days, he explained softly, waiting for the right moment. I've been staying in the executive suite, Bryn said, her voice steadier now. Bale has been bringing me food updates about you. I watched from the window yesterday as you drove away from the funeral home. But how? I asked, still struggling to accept the evidence of my own eyes. The paramedics, the hospital, the death certificate. Bryn took a shaky breath. I discovered they were slowly poisoning me. Small doses of digitalis in my morning coffee for 3 months. I was having heart palpitations, dizziness, weakness. I thought it was just age catching up with me. My blood turned to ice. They were trying to kill you. The plan was to give me a heart attack that looked completely natural, but I figured it out when I found the empty digitalis bottle in Axel's jacket pocket. That's when I knew we were both in mortal danger. She explained how she'd reached out to her college roommate, Dr. Betty Pierce, who worked at Phoenix General Hospital. Betty had helped stage the fake medical emergency, complete with falsified symptoms and a death certificate that would fool everyone except the 3 people who needed to know the truth. The funeral director, Marcus Torres, owed me a favor from when I helped his daughter get a scholarship. Bryn continued. He arranged for a weighted dummy in the casket. The closed casket ceremony was essential to the deception. I've been staying at Betty's cabin in Flagstaff when I wasn't here, she said. Planning, documenting, gathering evidence with Vale and the private investigator. Vale opened another folder. On his desk. Your wife has been working with us for months. Thatcher. We've documented systematic financial abuse, gaslighting, and now attempted murder. They weren't just stealing money, Bryn said, her voice hardening. They were preparing to kill us both. You were next on their list. They needed me gone first, so you'd be vulnerable and alone. I stared at my wife, this woman I'd loved for 45 years, who'd faked her own death to save our lives. Faking your death was the only way. It was the only way to make them reveal their true intentions. Now they think you're grieving and helpless. They'll move fast to get control of everything. Bryn stood and walked to the window overlooking downtown Phoenix. What I discovered about our daughter will break your heart, Thatcher. But you need to see all the evidence before they arrive. Vale checked his watch and moved toward his desk phone. I called them 20 minutes ago. Told them you were here signing insurance papers and seemed confused about the documents. They're on their way now. My stomach dropped. They're coming here. Bryn turned from the window, her expression grim but determined. It's time to spring the trap. Before I could process Bryn's resurrection, Vale moved to a recording device on his credenza. What you're about to hear will destroy any illusions about your family. He pressed play and Sky's voice filled the office with chilling clarity. Dad's getting suspicious. We need to move faster. Axel responded. The house is worth $750,000 plus his retirement accounts. Once we get power of attorney, we can liquidate everything. Sky continued coldly. What if he fights the competency evaluation? My daughter's laugh was devoid of warmth. He won't be a problem. Much longer. Neither will Mom. My face went white hearing the casual way she discussed our debts. This was my little girl whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose college tuition I'd paid. There are hours of these conversations, Bryn said softly. They've been planning this for over a year. Vale opened a laptop showing photographs that made my stomach lurch. Screenshots of Axel's online purchases, Digitalis tablets, syringes, medical reference books, Sky's internet searches, undetectable heart attack drugs, symptoms of dementia in elderly patients. The plan was methodical and horrifying. Kill Bryn first, with staged heart attack, then gradually poison me over months. Make it look like grief-induced cardiac failure. Life insurance payouts of $500,000 each, plus our house and retirement accounts. They had a 6-month timeline, Bryn explained. I was supposed to die in March. You were scheduled for August. They were literally counting days until our deaths, I whispered, staring at a calendar with dates circled in red ink. Vale pulled out bank statements that made me dizzy. They've opened 3 credit cards in your name, Thatcher. $45,000 in debt for luxury items you'd never purchased. Charges at high-end restaurants, designer stores, expensive jewelry. Axel had lost $180,000 at Desert Diamond Casino, while telling us they were struggling financially. Sky spent $30,000 on designer goods last month, Bryn added bitterly while claiming they couldn't afford groceries. Forged signatures on loan applications. Looked remarkably like my handwriting. They'd been practicing their fraud while sitting at my dinner table. They've stolen over $85,000 from your accounts, Vale said, intercepting your bank statements for 8 months. The financial theft was nothing compared to systematic gaslighting. Vale showed me hidden camera footage of Sky moving my reading glasses, then acting concerned when I couldn't find them. Axel hiding my keys in the refrigerator, suggesting I was becoming forgetful. They cancelled 6 medical appointments without telling you, Bryn said, then told Dr. Martinez you were unreliable. Security footage showed Sky talking to our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, shaking her head sadly. Dad's having more bad days than good. Ones were worried about his safety. They'd been building a guardianship case, collecting statements from neighbors, documenting manufactured incidents of confusion. Every stumble, every normal age-related forgetfulness, had been weaponized against me. Vale's phone buzzed, his secretary's voice. Mr. Vale, your guests have arrived. Should I send them up? Bryn peered down at the street. They think they're coming to comfort a grieving father, confused about insurance paperwork. Instead, they're walking into their own confession, Vale added, activating a recording device. In the distance, elevator doors opened with a soft chime. As we heard footsteps approaching in the hallway, Bryn quickly moved toward the conference room. I need to stay hidden until the right moment, she whispered urgently. Let them dig their own graves first. Vale nodded and gestured for her to slip back into the adjoining room. We'll confront them with the evidence, then reveal you when they're completely trapped. The office door burst open, and my daughter Sky strode in with Axel. Close behind their faces a mixture of concern and barely concealed irritation. They'd clearly rushed here, probably expecting to find a confused old man signing away his rights. Dad, What are you doing here? We've been looking everywhere for you, Sky said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of exaggerated worry she'd perfected over the years. Axel's eyes darted around the office suspiciously. Mr. Vale, why did you call us here? You said something about insurance paperwork and Dad being confused. Vale remained seated behind his desk, his expression professionally neutral. Your father wanted to discuss some financial matters. I thought it would be appropriate for a family to be present. What they didn't know was that hidden cameras were rolling, recording every word, every expression, every telltale sign of guilt that would soon surface. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking, not from age, but from rage that had been building for months. I know what you've been doing. Sky immediately shifted into her caretaker persona. Dad, you're confused. This isn't the place for you right now. Let's go home and get you some rest. She moved toward me with those practiced gestures of concern, but I stepped back. Vale placed the thick evidence folder on his conference table, with a deliberate thud that made both Sky and Axel flinched. Axel's eyes widened as he recognized some of the documents spilling out. Bank statements, credit card bills, photographs. His face went pale. Whatever lies people have been telling. Dad, you can't believe them, Sky said quickly, but her voice had lost its confident edge. These aren't lies, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. These are bank records, credit card statements, all in my name, all signed with forged versions of my signature. Vale methodically spread the evidence across his table like a prosecutor presenting his case. Credit card statements showing $45,000 in charges I'd never made. Gambling receipts from Desert Diamond Casino totaling $180,000 in Axel's name. We can explain those, Sky said desperately. They were emergency expenses. Medical bills, home repairs, things you forgot about. I picked up a receipt and waved it in front of her face. $30,000 at Tiffany & Company is a medical emergency. Axel tried a different approach. You don't understand the financial pressure we're under, Thatcher. We were trying to protect the family assets, make sure everything was secure for your future. That's when Vale played his ace. He pressed a button on his recording device, and their own voices filled the room with crystal clarity. He won't be a problem much longer. Neither will Mum. The silence that followed was deafening. Both Sky and Axel went rigid, trapped by their own words, echoing in the sterile office air. That recording is taken out of context, Sky stammered, but the confidence had completely drained from her voice. We were just discussing hypothetical scenarios, Axel added weakly. Estate planning, you know, everyone talks about inheritance planning. Inheritance planning, I roared, finding strength I didn't know I still possessed. You were planning to poison us. You already tried to kill your mother with a digitalis. Sky's mask finally slipped completely. Dad, you're being paranoid and delusional. This is exactly what we've been trying to tell people about your mental state. You're not thinking clearly. Even caught red-handed, she was still trying to gaslight me, still trying to make me doubt my own reality. Actually, a familiar voice said from behind them, his mind is perfectly clear. The conference room door opened and both Sky and Axel turned, probably expecting a lawyer or a security guard. Instead, they saw something impossible. Something that made Axel's face go white as paper. What the hell? He whispered. Sky's scream pierced the air raw and primal. The sound of someone watching their carefully constructed world collapse in real time. The color drained from both their faces as they stared at Bryn in complete disbelief. Axel stumbled backward, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. This is impossible, he whispered, his voice cracking. We saw you die. I watched the paramedics work on you. Sky was shaking her head violently as if she could make this nightmare disappear through sheer denial. The funeral, the burial, the death certificate. This can't be real. Bryn stepped fully into the room, her expression cold as winter steel. Disappointed I'm not actually dead. Sorry to ruin your inheritance timeline, Mom, Sky stammered, trying desperately to regain control of the situation. We can explain everything. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. Explain how you poisoned my coffee for months. Bryn's voice cut through the air like a blade. Explain the digitalis you bought online. Explain how you plan to make my husband's death look like grief-induced cardiac failure. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the impossible sight of their supposedly dead victim, Axel cracked first. The weight of months of deception and guilt came crashing down on him. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he blurted out, tears streaming down his face. The gambling debts, they were threatening to break my legs. We were desperate. Shut up, Axel, Sky hissed. Don't say anything else. But the dam had broken. They already know everything. Axel shouted back at her. The recordings, the bank statements, the poison purchases. We're finished. He turned to us with wild eyes. The casino loans? They had interest rates that were killing us. We owed money to people who don't accept late payments. We thought if we could just get access to your accounts temporarily. Bryn laughed bitterly by murdering us. Sky finally snapped her mask of false concern, completely shattered. We just needed you both out of the way. The money was going to be ours eventually anyway. You're both old. You don't need all that wealth just sitting in accounts. The cold calculation in her voice was more chilling than any scream. Vale had quietly pressed a button under his desk during the confrontation. Within minutes, the office door opened and Detective Maria Santos entered, with 2 uniformed officers. Sky Thatcher. Axel Thatcher. Axel Thatcher, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, and financial fraud. Detective Santos announced, pulling out her handcuffs. This is entrapment. Sky screamed as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. Those recordings are illegal. You can't use them in court. Actually, Detective Santos replied calmly, it's evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent, though you've already said quite enough. I watched in stunned silence as my own daughter was led away in handcuffs, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor of the office building. News crews had somehow already gathered outside their cameras, flashing as Sky and Axel were escorted 2 separate police cars. 2 weeks later, I sat in a Phoenix courthouse that buzzed with media attention. The charges were read aloud. Conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, elder abuse, wire fraud, identity theft, and attempted poisoning. The list seemed to go on forever. Sky and Axel had pled not guilty, and were now blaming each other for the entire scheme. Sky claimed Axel had manipulated her into going along with his desperate plans. Axel insisted that Sky had been the mastermind, using his gambling addiction as leverage to control him. When I took the witness stand to testify about the systematic abuse, the gaslighting, the financial theft, I looked directly at Sky. She stared back with eyes that held no remorse, only anger at being caught. The judge denied bail for both defendants. Given the calculated nature of these crimes and the clear danger posed to the victims, I consider both defendants to be flight risks and a continued threat to community safety. As court adjourned, I approached Sky one final time before she was led back to a holding cell. You're no longer my daughter, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the pain in my heart. She looked at me with pure hatred. Good. I never wanted a father who was too selfish to die when it was convenient. That afternoon, Bryn and I stood on our front lawn in Scottsdale as a real estate agent hammered a for sale sign into the desert, landscaping we'd maintained for 40 years. We can't stay here with all these memories, I said, watching our neighbors peek through their curtains at the spectacle our lives had become. Bryn took my hand and squeezed it gently. I know the perfect place for a fresh start. 6 months later, I sat on the wooden porch of our small adobe house in Sedona, watching the morning sun paint the Red Rock Mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The silence here wasn't the oppressive quiet of grief and suspicion that had filled our Scottsdale home. This was the peaceful silence of safety and genuine contentment. Bryn emerged from our kitchen carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee, her face glowing with a happiness I hadn't seen in years. Her garden was already blooming despite the desert climate, testament to her determination to create beauty wherever we planted our roots. Clay and Belle invited us for dinner tonight, she said, settling into the chair beside me. Belle's making her famous pot roast. Our neighbors had become genuine friends, something we'd forgotten was possible after years of wondering which smiles were real and which masked hidden agendas. Clay, for 68, a retired high school principal with laugh lines earned from decades of working with teenagers. Belle, 65, had been a pediatric nurse before retirement. Her gentle nature a balm to souls that had been battered by betrayal. For the first time in years, we feel truly safe, I told Bryn, reaching over to squeeze her hand. No one here wants anything from us except friendship. Our days had settled into simple pleasures that felt revolutionary after the complexity of our previous life. Morning coffee on the porch, evening walks through the desert trails, conversations that didn't require us to decode hidden meanings or watch for signs of manipulation. We were finally living for ourselves, not in constant fear of the people who were supposed to love us most. The final court resolution had come through last month. Sky received 4 years in state prison for attempted murder, conspiracy, elder abuse, and fraud. Axel got 6 years for the same charges, plus additional counts related to his gambling debts and money laundering. They divorced while awaiting sentencing, each blaming the other in bitter court filings that made headlines in the Phoenix newspapers. The judge had ordered restitution of $120,000, though we knew we'd likely never see most of that money. The district attorney had called it the most calculated elder abuse case in county history. While the judge's final words still echoed in my mind, "Your betrayal of parental trust is beyond comprehension." What surprised me most was how quickly we'd found community among other survivors. Clay had shared his own painful story during one of our early conversations. We cut ties with our son 8 years ago. He told us over dinner. Drug addiction, constant stealing, manipulation that nearly destroyed our marriage. Belle had nodded. Sadly, he'd show up crying, promising he'd change, begging for just one more chance. We gave him dozens of chances before we realized we were enabling his destruction of our family. It was the hardest decision we ever made, Clay continued. But it saved our marriage and probably our lives. Some people choose paths you simply can't follow, no matter how much you love them. I'd found myself opening up in ways I never expected. I never thought I'd have to choose between my child and my life. But some people become so toxic that loving them means destroying yourself. We'd started attending a support group for elder abuse survivors, meeting other parents who'd been victimized by their own children. The stories were heartbreakingly similar. Financial theft, emotional manipulation, systematic campaigns to isolate and control elderly parents for monetary gain. During quiet moments like these, I often reflected on the journey that had brought us here. And I spent 35 years raising her with love, teaching her right from wrong, trying to be the best father I could be, I said to Bryn. Never imagined she'd repay that by planning our murders. Bryn's expression was thoughtful as she watched a roadrunner dart between the desert plants. We did everything right as parents, Thatcher. We loved her, supported her, gave her every opportunity to become a good person. Sometimes good parents still raise children who choose evil. I said, it's not our failure, it's theirs. The mail truck's engine broke the morning quiet, and our carrier waved as he approached with the day's delivery. Most of our mail now consisted of utility bills and gardening catalogies, a refreshing change from the legal documents and court notices that had dominated our lives for months. But today was different. Among the routine correspondence was an envelope that made my blood run cold. The return address read Arizona State Prison with Sky's name printed in the corner. I stared at the letter, my hands trembling slightly. Bryn noticed immediately. You don't have to read it, she said gently, her voice carrying the same protective tone she'd used when shielding me from painful truths in the past. I turned the envelope over in my hands, feeling its weight. But maybe I should know what she has to say. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers, Bryn watching quietly from her chair as I unfolded the handwritten pages. Sky's familiar handwriting looked smaller, somehow less confident than the bold signature she'd once used to forge my name on financial documents. Dear Dad, I know you probably never want to see me again, and I understand why. Prison has given me time to think about what I became, and I'm horrified by the person staring back at me in the mirror. I continued reading, my emotions swinging between hope and skepticism with each sentence. The therapy sessions here are helping me understand the depth of my selfishness and cruelty. I've been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, but that's not an excuse for what I did to you and Mom. Mental illness doesn't make someone evil. I chose greed over family money, over love and convenience, over human decency. The letter went on for 3 pages, each paragraph revealing more self-awareness than I'd ever heard from my daughter in 35 years. Axel didn't force me into this conspiracy. I want to be clear about that. Even though we're blaming each other in court, I made my own evil choices. I destroyed everything good in my life, betrayed the 2 people who loved me most, all for $750,000 that I'll never see now anyway. Her final paragraph was the most surprising. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I'm not asking you to visit or write back. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I am now, and I understand why you had to cut me out of your life to survive. I set the letter down and stared out at the red rocks, my mind flooded with memories. Part of me remembered the little girl I'd raised with such hope and love. Bedtime stories where I'd done different voices for all the characters, teaching her to ride her bicycle in our Scottsdale driveway, running alongside her until she found her balance. Her high school graduation, where she'd hugged me tight and whispered, "Thanks for believing in me, Dad." But those memories were now overshadowed by darker ones. Her cold voice saying, we needed to get out of the way. Her calculated manipulation of neighbors and friends, The digitalis she'd used to slowly poison her own mother. What does your heart tell you? Bryn asked gently, recognizing the war playing out across my face. My heart tells me she chose to become a stranger, I said finally. The daughter I loved died the day she decided our deaths were worth more than our lives. Without another word, I tore the letter into small pieces and let the desert wind scatter them across our garden. Some relationships simply cannot survive attempted murder, regardless of blood ties or shared history. I gave her 35 years of unconditional love, I said, watching the paper fragments disappear among Bryn's flowers. She repaid it by planning our deaths for money. That's not mental illness or temporary desperation. That's evil, pure, and simple. Bryn reached over and took my hand. Are you at peace with this decision? Yes, I said, surprised by how certain I felt. I'm done being her victim. Over these past months, I've learned lessons I never expected to need. At 72 years old, I learned that family is about loyalty and love, not just shared DNA. Clay and Belle have shown us more genuine care in 6 months than Sky demonstrated in years. I learned that sometimes the people closest to you are the most dangerous, because they know exactly how to exploit your love and trust. But I also learned that you don't have to let them destroy your life in the name of family obligation. Bren and I are 72 and 68 years old, and for the first time in years, we are genuinely free to be happy. We're not walking on eggshells, not second-guessing our own memories, not wondering which family members are plotting against us. We're just living simply and peacefully surrounded by people who actually care about our well-being. Looking back on this true story, I realize how blessed I am that God gave me the strength to survive my own daughter's betrayal. If you're watching these grandpa stories and recognizing similar warning signs in your own family, please don't make the same mistakes I did. Don't ignore the red flags when adult children suddenly become overly concerned about your declining health. Don't dismiss it when they start controlling your finances or isolating you from friends. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, because it probably is. The biggest lesson from my true story is this: toxic family members will use your love against you. They'll exploit your parental guilt, your desire to help, and your natural trust in blood relatives. But God didn't put us on this earth to be victims of our own children's greed. I spent months doubting my own memory, questioning my own judgment, because I couldn't believe my daughter would hurt me. Don't let anyone gaslight you into thinking you're losing your mind when you're actually being systematically abused. These grandpa stories aren't just entertainment. They're warnings. Elder abuse by family members is more common than most people realize. If you're experiencing financial manipulation, emotional abuse, or threats from relatives, reach out for help. Contact Adult Protective Services, talk to trusted friends, or call the Elder Abuse Hotline. Most importantly, remember that cutting toxic people out of your life isn't unforgiving. It's survival. God wants us to love ourselves enough to protect our own well-being. You don't owe anyone access to your life, your money, or your peace of mind, not even your own children. Trust in God's plan for your safety and happiness. He'll give you the wisdom to recognize danger and the courage to act on it. If this true story opened your eyes or touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life grandpa stories that could save your life or the life of someone you love. Your engagement helps these important stories reach people who desperately need them. Thank you for being part of our community. I was having dinner with my daughter Aurora and her new husband Kieran at Portland's finest restaurant, celebrating their honeymoon. When he stepped outside for a business call, an elderly woman approached our table with terror in her eyes. She pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand and whispered urgently, "Get your daughter out of here now." Something in her voice told me I had to listen. That decision saved both our lives. Welcome everyone. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and whether you think I made the right choice, trusting that elderly woman's warning. My name is Vernon Kane and I've spent 25 years building homes for Portland families. I thought I understood stability. I was wrong about what really mattered. 2 weeks ago, I walked my daughter Aurora down the aisle. She's 32, a brilliant UI designer, and she'd found someone who made her laugh again after her mother passed. Kieran Thorne seemed perfect, charming, successful, everything I'd hoped for her. Tonight we were celebrating at Heathman Restaurant, one of Portland's finest. Aurora looked radiant in blue, her wedding ring catching the candlelight as she talked excitedly about their honeymoon. "Dad, you should see the house Kieran found," she said, cutting her salmon. "Pearl District with those big windows you always said make a home feel alive." Kieran raised his wineglass to family and new beginnings. I should have felt happy. Instead, something nagged at me. how quickly everything had moved, how he'd handled all the paperwork. But Aurora was glowing. That's when Kieran's phone buzzed. His expression shifted. Important business call. Give me 2 minutes. He kissed Aurora's forehead and stepped toward the entrance. The moment he disappeared, an elderly woman from the next table stood up. I'd noticed her earlier, sitting alone, watching us with uncomfortable intensity. She moved quickly despite her age, suddenly beside our table. Her face was pale, hands trembling as she pressed a folded paper into my palm. "Get your daughter out of here now," she whispered, voice shaking with terror. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You don't know who your daughter really married." The words hit like ice water. Something in her eyes, pure desperate fear, made every paternal instinct scream danger. "What are you talking about?" I started, but she was already moving toward the exit. Aurora looked confused. "Dad, what was that about?" I looked at the paper, then at my daughter's trusting face, then toward Kieran, still on his call. Every rational part said, this was crazy. But the irrational part, the part that had kept me alive in dangerous situations, was screaming, "Aura, we need to leave right now." "What?" "But we haven't even finished. Trust me." I stood throwing cash on the table. "Do you trust me?" She saw something in my face that made her nod. I spotted the fire alarm near the restrooms. In 30 seconds, this place would be chaos. Sometimes you create your own exit. I pulled the alarm. The piercing shriek filled the restaurant instantly. Diners jumped up. Servers dropped trays. Everyone moving toward exits. Perfect cover. "Dad, what are you doing?" Aurora shouted over the noise. "Saving your life," I shouted back, taking her hand and pulling her toward the emergency exit. "I hope." We pushed through confused diners and burst into the cool Portland night. Behind us, the restaurant emptied in controlled chaos. Fire trucks already wailing. Aurora stared at me, confusion and trust mixing on her face. "Dad, you're scaring me." "I'm scared too, sweetheart." I looked back where Kieran was pushing through the crowd, frantically searching. But sometimes being scared keeps you alive. The safety of my living room felt like a lie. Aurora sat on the couch still in that blue dress, watching me pace. Her phone buzzed against the coffee table. Kieran's name flashing for the 7th time. "Dad, I have to answer," Aurora said, reaching for it. "Let me handle this." I caught her wrist gently and picked up the phone. "Kieran Vernon, thank God." "Where's Aurora? I couldn't find you guys after the alarm." "She's with me." I kept my voice steady. "She got overwhelmed by the chaos. You know how she gets with crowds. Is she okay? Can I talk to her?" "She's resting." The whole thing really shook her up. "Why don't you head home? We'll all feel better in the morning." A pause. Too long. I'd really like to hear her voice. "Vernon." Aurora was shaking her head at me, eyes wide. Something in Kieran's tone had shifted. Less worried husband, more something else. "She's already taken something to help her sleep." I lied. "I'll have her call you tomorrow." Another pause. "Take care of her, Vernon. She means everything to me." The line went dead. Aurora stared at me. "Dad, what's going on?" I unfolded the paper the old woman had given me. Shaky handwriting showed an address in Southeast Portland. And below it, "Check her accounts. Check everything. They move fast once they start." "We need to look at your banking," I said. Aurora pulled out her laptop, fingers trembling as she logged. "And Dad, this is crazy. Kieran wouldn't." She stopped mid-sentence. We both stared at the screen. A pending transaction. $50,000 scheduled to transfer tomorrow morning to an unknown account. Aurora's face went white. "I didn't authorize this. I would never." She clicked frantically. "It's using my digital signature, but I swear I never signed this." More clicking revealed savings account restrictions she'd never requested. Her investment portfolio showed pending beneficiary changes, all dated within the last week. "How is this possible?" she whispered. I thought about those papers Karen had brought by. "Remember the insurance updates after the wedding? All those documents you signed?" Her hand flew to her mouth. "The marriage certificate updates, beneficiary forms. I signed everything he put in front of me. I trusted him. This wasn't random. This was surgical, professional, planned. And if that old woman was right, Aurora wasn't the first." "Pack a bag," I said. "Small one." "Where?" I looked at the address. Southeast Portland. Unfamiliar territory. "To find out who's trying to save your life." Aurora stood still, staring at her laptop. "Dad, if this is real, if Kieran is really, then we figure it out. Together. But somewhere he can't find us while we're figuring." She nodded. closing the laptop with shaking hands. How long have you known something was wrong? About 30 minutes longer than you have. As she headed upstairs to pack, I looked out at the empty street. Somewhere out there, Kieran was probably making calls of his own. The question was, how much time did we have before he realized his perfect plan was falling apart? Janet Williams lived where hope had worn thin. Her small house sat behind chain-link fencing, painting, but guarded and meticulously maintained. Every window glowed with warm light, as if she feared the dark. She opened the door before we could knock. You came. Good. Coming quickly. The living room hit me like a shrine. Photographs covered every surface. The same young woman at different ages. Graduation shots, vacation photos, candid moments of infectious laughter that reminded me painfully of Aurora. That's my daughter, Rachel, Janet said. She would have been 34 next month. Aurora moved closer to the photos. She's beautiful. What happened? Janet's hand shook, pouring coffee. She married Kieran Thorne 2 years ago. 3 months later, she was dead. Aurora sank into the worn armchair, face pale. They went out on his boat, LakeAsigo.com order. According to Kieran, a sudden storm hit. Boat capsized. Rachel couldn't swim well. Janet's voice turned mechanical. He was found on shore 2 hours later. Hypothermic, traumatized, the grieving widow who tried so hard to save his wife. She pulled out a manila folder spreading documents across the coffee table. Marriage certificate, property transfers, insurance policies. Just like you, she signed everything. By the time she died, everything belonged to him. Her grandmother's house savings car. Aurora studied the papers. These look legitimate. They are legitimate. Kieran's mother is Barbara Thorne. She works for the city, has access to official forms, stamps, databases. She can make any transaction look absolutely legal. My blood ran cold. How many others? Janet opened another folder. More photos, death certificates, property transfers. 6 that I've tracked. Rachel was number 7. Aurora would be number 8. She laid out photos like playing cards. Different young women sharing that same trusting vulnerability. Kate Mills car accident. Beth Cole, Hikin Fall. Amy Reed overdose. Jess Fox Hauser. Mia Stone drowning. All within 6 months of marrying Kieran. Aurora was shaking. How has no one caught them? Because they're smart. Different jurisdictions, different methods. Barbara Thorne has 20 years building her reputation as a community pillar. Who questions her paperwork? I studied the timeline. How long have you been tracking them? Since they buried my daughter. I knew something was wrong. Rachel was terrified of boats would never go voluntarily. But no one listens to grieving mothers with wild theories. She showed a notebook filled with dates, locations, names. I've been following their pattern, trying to warn victims. Always too late or they wouldn't believe me. She looked at me directly. You're the first father who listened. The scope was staggering. Not some desperate scam. A business. A family business. Running for years using the city's own systems as cover. We need proof, I said. Real evidence that can't be dismissed. Janet nodded grimly. Barbara keeps records. Has to. Too many transactions to remember. Filing system somewhere. Probably her office. Aurora looked up from the photos. Dad, if we don't stop them, we will. I gathered the documents hand steady despite building rage. But we need to be smarter than they are. Dawn broke gray over Portland, and with it came the hardest conversation of my life. You have to go back to him. I told Aurora over coffee that neither of us could taste. She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Dad, after everything we learned last night, especially after everything we learned, I leaned across the kitchen table. If you disappear, he'll know we're on to him. He'll run, and we'll never get the evidence we need to stop him. Her hands trembled around her mug. I don't know if I can do this. Look him in the eye. Pretend to everything's normal when I know what he's planning. You're stronger than you think, and you're not doing this alone. I pulled out my phone. Text and tell him you're feeling better. You want to see him. 20 minutes later, Aurora was putting on makeup to hide the sleepless night, practicing her smile in the hallway mirror. How's this look? Like a woman who loves her husband, I said, hating every word. She nodded, took a deep breath, and walked out to face a man who was planning to kill her. While Aurora played her role, I had my own performance to give. I drove downtown to the city planning office, a brutalist concrete building that looked like it had been designed to crush hope. Barbara Thorne worked on the 4th floor, according to the directory in the lobby. I spent 2 hours learning the building's rhythms. Security guard made rounds every 40 minutes. Cleaning crew arrived at 1000 p.m. Most importantly, the parking garage had a service entrance that stayed unlocked for maintenance vehicles. My phone buzzed. Text from Aurora. Coffee with K. Going okay so far. I texted back. Stay strong. Almost done here. But I wasn't almost done. I was just getting started. The building's public records showed Barbara Thorne had been deputy director of property records for 15 years. 15 years of access to every real estate transaction in the city. 15 years of learning exactly how to make fake documents look real. My phone rang. Aurora's ringtone. Dad. Her voice was tight. Controlled. Can you pick up some groceries? Kieran's making dinner tonight. Code for trouble. What do you need? Well, he mentioned he has some paperwork for me to sign. Something about updating our insurance after the honeymoon. He seemed excited about it. My blood went cold. They were moving faster than we thought. Any idea what kind of paperwork? He said it was a surprise, something that would secure our future together. The way she said it, I could hear the fear bleeding through her careful tone. I'll get those groceries, I said. See you soon. I hung up and stared at the city planning building. Tonight couldn't come fast enough. When Aurora came home that evening, she looked exhausted from the performance of her life. How bad was it? I asked. He kept watching me like he was looking for something. And Dad. She pulled out her phone, showed me a photo she'd taken discreetly. He had files spread out on his desk. I saw names, women's names with dollar amounts next to them. One of the names was Aurora Kane. The number next to it made my stomach turn 750 ass flowers. We're going in tonight, I said. Aurora nodded. What? Do you need me to do what you've been doing all day? Be brave. I looked out at the darkening Portland sky. In a few hours, we'd either have the evidence to destroy Barbara Thorne's operation, or we'd be the next names on Kieran's list. Dad, Aurora's voice was small. What if we get caught? Then at least we get caught fighting back. 11 p.m. in downtown Portland felt like the bottom of the ocean. The city planning office loomed above us, most windows dark, except for harsh security lights. You sure about this? Aurora whispered as we approached the service entrance. No amount, I admitted, pulling on latex gloves. But I'm sure about what happens if we don't try. The parking garage service door was propped open by some careless maintenance worker. We slipped inside Aurora's phone, flashlight cutting through darkness. The building felt predatory at night. Every echo too loud, every shadow too deep. 4th floor. Stairs, not elevator. By the 3rd floor, Aurora was breathing hard. What if the files are encrypted? Then we hope you're as good with computers as you are with design. Barbara Thorne's office door. Might as well have read Evil Lives here. I pulled out the small toolkit I'd bought that afternoon. Since when do you know how to pick locks? Construction security in college. Some skills stick. The lock clicked open. Keep watch. Barbara's office was sterile, organized cold. File cabinets lined one wall, each drawer labeled with bureaucratic precision. Try the computer, I told Aurora, attacking the locked filing cabinet. She slid behind the desk, fingers flying over keys. Password protected, but she pulled out a USB drive. Good thing I brought my toolkit, too. Where did you learn? UX design requires creative problem solving. The screen flickered to life. I'm in, while Aurora navigated digital files. I forced open the cabinet inside folders organized by year, each containing property transfers. But a pattern emerged as I flipped through them. I've got hard copies here. Marriage certificates, death certificates, property deeds, and I've got the digital database, she said, voiced tight with horror. Dad, this is everything. Names, property, values, timeline, even method notes. She turned the monitor toward me. A spreadsheet like a serial killer's trophy case. Kate Mills, $340,000. Car accident, $3,152,022. Beth Cole, $280,000. Hiking fall 072-202 to Amy Reed. 420,000. Overdose 112022. Jess Fox, 39 IRS 000. House fire EO 21423. Mia Stone. 310,000. Drowning 063-02023. Rachel Williams, 450. Boating accident 10-12. 2023. Aurora Kane, $750, 50,000. Method TBD, status active. They've stolen over $3 million. I breathed. Aurora was taking photos. Camera flash illuminating our faces in stark bursts. There's more. Future targets folder. They're researching other women. I grabbed my phone, photographing physical files. Every document, signature, forged stamp, complete confession. Almost done, Aurora said, copying financial records. Everything's backed up to the cloud. I was closing the last drawer when we both heard it. Footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. Getting closer, Aurora's eyes met mine. We'd been so focused on evidence that we'd forgotten the most important rule. Always have an exit strategy. The footsteps stopped directly outside Barbara's office. The door handle turned with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. I grabbed Aurora's arm, pulling her behind Barbara's desk as the door opened. Through the gap, I saw expensive loafers and black security boots. I know you're in here. Kieran's voice was calm, conversational. Motion sensors picked you up 20 minutes ago. Aurora's hand found mine, gripped tight with terror. Looking for my wife and father-in-law, Kieran continued. They've been acting strange since dinner. Thought they might be here doing something foolish. The security guard's radio crackled. Should I call it in? Not yet, Frank. Family matter. Kieran's feet moved closer to the desk. In seconds, he'd see us. Time to stop being prey. I stood fast, putting myself between Kieran and Aurora. You're right. We're doing something foolish. Trying to save my daughter's life. Kieran's smile was charming, but his eyes were ice. Vernon, you're making this harder than necessary. Aurora, sweetheart, come out. We need to talk. She's not going anywhere with you. Actually, she is. Kieran nodded to Frank, who stepped forward. Frank thinks you're burglars. Breaking and entering is serious, unless Aurora comes home with her worried husband. Aurora stood slowly, phone clutched in her hand. Our evidence, Kieran. I know what you are. I know about Kate Mills, Beth Cole, all of them. Kieran's composure cracked. You don't know anything. I know you killed them, Aurora said, voice stronger than ever. And I know you're planning to kill me. Kieran lunged toward her, but I was ready. 25 years of construction work kept me strong. Rage made me faster. I caught him with my shoulder, sending him stumbling into Frank. Run! I shouted. Fire exit. Aurora bolted for the emergency door while I grappled with Kieran. He was younger, but I was desperate. Frank reached for his radio as I threw my weight against him, sending us crashing into filing cabinets. The fire exit alarm shrieked as Aurora hit the door. Perfect chaos. Stop her, Kieran screamed, but I grabbed a glass paperweight from Barbara's desk, bringing it down on his wrist as he reached for his phone. He howled, clutching his arm. Frank was back up, radio in hand. Security breach, 4th floor. I didn't wait. I sprinted for the fire exit, following Aurora down 4 flights, alarm wailing like a banshee. We burst into the parking garage as police sirens wailed in the distance. Aurora was at my truck, fumbling with the handle. Keys, she gasped. I threw them as the stairwell door slammed open behind us. Kieran's voice echoed. Find them. They can't. Get far. We jumped in just as Frank appeared. I gunned the engine tires, squealing as we raced toward the exit. In the rearview mirror, Kieran stood in the garage entrance, phone pressed to his ear, twisted with fury. They know, Aurora said, clutching her phone with our evidence. They know we're on to them. Good, I said, taking a hard ride onto the empty street. Now they know what it feels like to be hunted, but we'd crossed a line. No more pretending, no careful planning. This was war now, and we had maybe hours before Kieran and Barbara disappeared forever. Sometimes the best hiding place is in plain sight. We're going back, I told Aurora as we sat in my truck outside a 24-hour diner, planning our next move. Back where Dad, they'll be waiting for us. Exactly. I pulled out my phone, opening the camera app, but this time we're bringing witnesses. I set up my phone on the dashboard, angling it to capture both our faces. With shaking fingers, I started a live stream on Facebook, then shared it to Instagram and Twitter simultaneously. Testing. Okay, we're live. I looked directly into the camera. Portland residents. This is Vernon Kane. If you're watching this, you're about to witness something that will shock you. My daughter Aurora and I are about to expose a criminal operation that's been running in our city for years. The viewer count started at 0, then climbed to 1247. 156. What we're about to show you is evidence of multiple murders disguised as accidents. The people responsible work for our own city government. I held up one of the printed photos from Barbara's files. This woman, Barbara Thorne, Deputy Director of Property Records, has been helping her son kill young women and steal their property. Comments started flooding in. Is this real? Call the police. Share this now. Aurora leaned into frame. I'm Aurora Kane. 2 weeks ago, I married a man named Kieran Thornton. Yesterday I discovered he was planning to kill me for my inheritance. Tonight, we found proof he's done this to 7 other women. The viewer count hit 800. We're going to confront Barbara Thorne right now, live on camera. I said, if something happens to us, you'll all be witnesses. Share this stream. Record it. Don't let them cover this up. We drove back to the city planning. Building. The parking garage was empty now. Frank and the police were long gone, but Barbara's office windows still glowed with light on the 4th floor. She's still there, Aurora said, probably destroying evidence. Not if 5,000 people are watching. We took the elevator this time. No point in stealth anymore. The viewer count had exploded to labor. 47 people watching live comments, streaming faster than I could read them. Barbara's office door was closed, but I could hear her voice inside talking rapidly on the phone. I positioned my phone to capture everything, then knocked. Barbara Thorne, this is Vernon Kane. We need to talk. The phone conversation stopped. Abruptly, after a long pause, the door opened. Barbara looked exactly like what she was, a bureaucrat caught in the act. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her desk covered with shredded documents. Mr. Kane, I don't know what you think you're doing, but we're exposing a murderer, I said, holding out my phone so she could see the viewer. Count 423 and climbing. Say hello to Portland Barbara. They're all watching. Her face went white as she realized what was happening. You can't just show them the files, Aurora. Aurora stepped into frame, holding up the photographs we'd taken. Barbara Thorne has been forging property transfer documents for years. Her son Kieran marries women, kills them in staged accidents, then inherits everything. Comments exploded. Oh my God. Someone called 911. My sister knew one of those girls. Barbara tried to close the door, but I pushed it open, keeping the camera rolling. Kate Mills car accident. Beth Cole hiking, fall. Amy Reed, overdose. 7 women dead. Barbara, how much money have you stolen? This is harassment. You're trespassing. We're citizens exercising our right to expose corruption. I said to the camera, look at her desk, everyone. She's been destroying evidence all night. The viewer count hit 5,000. Comments were coming so fast, they were just a blur. Share this. Call police. Save the video. Barbara's composure finally cracked completely. You have no idea what you've done. No idea who you're dealing with. Actually, we do. Aurora said, we know exactly who we're dealing with. The question is, do you know who you're dealing with? Because right now, 5,000 people are watching you confess to murder. That's when we heard footsteps in the hallway. Fast, angry footsteps. That could only belong to one person. But these weren't the footsteps we were expecting. Janet Williams stepped into the office, but she wasn't the grieving mother we'd met 2 nights ago. 3 men in dark suits flanked her, their jackets bulging with concealed weapons. Her entire demeanor had changed. Gone was the frail, trembling woman. In her place stood someone who radiated cold authority. Well, she said, surveying the scene with satisfaction. Vernon Kane, the helpful father. You've done exactly what I needed you to do. I kept my phone steady, the live stream still running. The viewer count had jumped to 7,842 and climbing. Janet, what are you doing here? Cleaning up loose ends. She smiled, but it was nothing like the sad, grateful expression I remembered. Barbara, darling, did you really think your sloppy little operation could run forever without attracting attention? Barbara stared at Janet, in confusion. What are you talking about? Who are you? I'm your replacement, Janet said simply. You see, Vernon, when I told you my daughter married Kieran, I was telling the truth. What I didn't mention is that I've been running a much more sophisticated operation than Barbara's amateur hour for the past 15 years. The livestream comments exploded. What? Plot twist. Record everything. Aurora grabbed my arm. Dad, what's happening? Janet walked to Barbara's desk, casually pushing aside the shredded documents. Barbara, your problem was always thinking too small. Fake marriages, staged accidents. So crude, so obvious. You were drawing FBI attention to Portland, and that was bad for my business. Your business? Barbara's voice cracked. Tech executives, federal contractors, city planners. Real money, real power. Your little widowmaker scheme was bringing heat to my territory. Janet turned to the camera, speaking directly to our audience. 10,000 people watching now. Perfect. I realized with growing horror what was happening. You used us. You used Aurora as bait to destroy Barbara. Of course I did. Barbara's operation needed to be eliminated, but it couldn't do it directly. Too messy, too obvious. Much better to let an angry father do the dirty work. She gestured to her men. Now I can step in, take over her client list, and expand my own operations. Barbara finally understood. You manipulated everything. The warning at the restaurant, the address, even the break-in. I made it all possible, Janet confirmed. Though, I must say, Vernon, your livestream idea was inspired. I couldn't have planned better publicity for Barbara's downfall. The viewer count hit 10,247. Comments were streaming. Someone call FBI. This is insane. Save this video. What about Rachel? Aurora demanded. Your daughter, who died. Janet's mask slipped for just a moment, showing cold calculation. Rachel Williams. I never had a daughter named Rachel. That grieving mother act was just theater. I'm not even a Williams. The name's Margaret Cross, and I've been running organized crime in this city longer than Barbara's been breathing. One of Janet's men stepped forward. Ma'am, we should wrap this up. Yes, we should. Margaret looked directly at me. Vernon, you have two choices. Work for me. Help me build a real criminal empire. Or that's when the sirens cut through the night air. Distant at first, then growing louder. Multiple units coming fast. Margaret's expression changed from confidence to alarm. What? 10,000 witnesses? I said, holding up my phone. 10,000 people who just watched you confess to running a criminal organization. You think they weren't calling 911? The comments confirmed it. Police on the way. I called FBI. SWAT team coming. Barbara actually laughed. A bitter, desperate sound. You brilliant fool. Margaret, she just confessed to federal crimes in front of 10,000 people. The sirens were getting closer. Through the office window, I could see flashing lights reflecting off the buildings below. Margaret's men were looking nervous, hands moving toward their weapons. Boss, we need to go now. But it was too late. The elevator dinged, and we could hear heavy footsteps, multiple voices, the sound of tactical gear. Portland Police Building is surrounded. I looked at the phone screen. 12,633 viewers and climbing. The comments were a celebration. They're caught. Justice heroes Margaret Cross. The woman who'd manipulated us all stared at the phone in my hands with something like respect. You really did it, Vernon. You destroyed us all. The office erupted into chaos as Margaret's men reached for their weapons. But Barbara wasn't going down without a fight. You think you could just waltz in and take over? Barbara screamed, diving behind her desk as one of Margaret's thugs drew his gun. I grabbed Aurora, pulling her down as the first shots ran out. The live stream was still running. 15,000 viewers now watching a real-time gunfight unfold in a government building. Stay down, I shouted, shielding Aurora with my body while keeping the phone angled to capture everything. Margaret's voice cut through the gunfire. This is what happens when amateurs try to play with professionals. But the shooting lasted less than 30 seconds. The elevator doors burst open and tactical officers in full gear flooded the office. Portland Police, drop your weapons now. Margaret's men were professionals, but they weren't suicidal. Weapons clattered to the floor as hands went up. Barbara emerged from behind her desk. Mascara stirred down her face, hands raised. Don't shoot. I surrender. Margaret Cross stood in the center of the chaos, strangely calm, as officers surrounded her. She looked directly at my phone camera one last time. 15,000 witnesses to the end of an empire. Margaret Cross, you're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, and accessory to murder. The lead officer announced as handcuffs clicked into place. Barbara Thorne, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and racketeering. I helped Aurora to her feet, both of us shaking, but unharmed. The livestream comments were going insane. Holy, they're all arrested. Save this video forever. Ladies and gentlemen, I said to the camera, my voice with exhaustion and relief. He had just witnessed the takedown of two criminal organizations that have been terrorizing Portland for years. 15,000 of you called for help, shared this stream, and made sure these killers couldn't escape justice. A detective approached us, notebook in hand. Mr. Kane, I'm Detective Rodriguez. We're going to need full statements from both of you. Everything's right here, Aurora said, holding up her phone. Photos of all their files, financial records, victim lists. It's all backed up to the cloud. Through the office windows, I could see news vans pulling up outside. Reporters were setting up cameras, preparing to tell the story that 15,000 people had already witnessed live. Dad, Aurora said quietly as the criminals were led away in handcuffs. We actually did it. I pulled her into a hug. This brilliant brave daughter who'd risked everything to help me save her own life. We did it together. The live stream was still running. I looked into the camera one last time. To everyone who watched, who shared, who called for help, you saved my daughter's life tonight. You proved that when good people stand together, evil doesn't stand a chance. Comments flooded in. Heroes, Father of the Year, Love Wins, Family First. Kate Mills, Beth Cole, Amy Reed, Jess Fox, Mia Stone, Rachel Williams. They didn't die in vain. Aurora added, her voice strong despite her tears. Their stories helped to stop this from happening to anyone else. As we walked out of that building, together, past the arrested criminals and the gathering media circus, I realized something profound. For weeks, I'd been terrified of losing Aurora. But tonight, I hadn't just saved my daughter. I'd found her. Really found her. The scared young woman who'd married Kieran was gone, replaced by a warrior who'd helped take down a criminal empire. The live stream ended with over 20,000 viewers and hundreds of thousands of shares. By morning, the story would be national news. Margaret Croft and Barbara Thorne would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Kieran Thorne was arrested at his apartment 3 hours later. But more importantly, Aurora was safe. Our family was safe. And sometimes that's all that matters. Love doesn't just conquer all. Sometimes it live streams the victory for the whole world to see. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized how close I came to losing Aurora forever. Don't be like me. Don't ignore those gut feelings that something's wrong. When that elderly woman pressed that paper into my hand, every logical part of my brain said it was crazy. But God had put her there for a reason, and I'm grateful I listened. The truth is, I'd been so focused on wanting Aurora to be happy that I missed the red flags. Kieran's charm, his insistence on handling all the paperwork, the way he rushed everything. These weren't signs of love, they were signs of a predator. This true story taught me that a father's protective instincts aren't paranoia, they're a gift from God. What I learned from this nightmare is that evil often wears a beautiful mask. Margaret Cross fooled me completely with her grieving mother act. Barbara Thorne built her reputation as a community pillar while destroying families. They counted on people like me being too trusting, too polite to ask hard questions. But here's what I want every father watching to understand. When your child's life is at stake, politeness doesn't matter. Social media, live streaming, making noise, these aren't just modern tools. Even traditional grandpa stories like mine can become powerful weapons against corruption when shared with the right audience. The most important lesson from this true story: trust in God's timing and the power of family love. When Aurora and I worked together, when we refused to give up on each other, that's when we found our strength. The same God who protected us. The night is watching over your family, too. Don't wait for danger to knock on your door like it did mine. Pay attention to the people your children bring home. Ask questions. Trust your instincts. These grandpa stories aren't just entertainment. They're warnings, lessons passed down to protect the next generation. If this true story resonated with you, please share it with other parents who need to hear it. Leave a comment about your own experiences with protecting family. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more meaningful grandpa stories that could save lives. Your engagement helps these important messages reach the families who need them.